Hello and welcome to Module 28, our final module. So we'll be discussing digital forensics and incident analysis and response. All right, so this is our final chapter for this semester. I hope you enjoyed it. And don't forget to take notes. And let's begin. So we'll be covering 4 topics: evidence handling and the attack attribution. We'll discuss the Cyberkill Chain and the diamond model of intrusion analysis. Those are definitely going to be on the exams, even on the certification exam. And then we'll talk about incident response. What do you do when you have an incident response? Right, so we're going to apply the NIST 861 R2 incident handling procedures. All right, so let's begin. Let's take a look at the handling and attack attribution. Digital forensics. Well, we need to know what that means first. So write down the first 2 bullet points. Digital forensics is the recovery and investigation of information found on digital devices, and it relates to criminal activity. So that's important. So the indicator of compromise, the IOCs, are the evidence that cybersecurity incident has occurred. Okay, so here's an example of HIPAA, and it's where, digital forensic investigation must be used to determine the affected individuals and also to certify the number of affected individuals so that the appropriate notification can be made in compliance with HIPAA regulations. Okay, so an analyst must know the requirements regarding these preservations and handling of such evidence. So the digital forensic process, please write these 4 down. You need to be able to collect the data, and collection meaning you identify the potential sources for forensic data and acquisition, handling, and storage. Examination, assessing the actual data that you have, the relevant information from the collected data that you got. Analysis, you're going to draw a conclusion after you examine it, what happened. And then you report, the reporting. So remember, collection, examination, analysis, and reporting. That's the digital process. Then you got to type what type of evidence you have. Please write these down. You have direct evidence, which means you have, somebody told, somebody showed the actual crime happening, and eyewitnesses, indisputable evidence. That's direct evidence. So there's no denying. You have indirect evidence. This is more circumstantial evidence. You have theories about what happened. Best evidence could be on storage devices that can be used by the accused. I have some information on my flash drive I can show you, right? And that can be proven that it has not been altered, of course. Corroborating evidence. This evidence supports the assertion that the developed for best evidence. This is, a lot of information got together, and this is what makes sense. All right, collections order. So please write that down. According to the RFC 3227, the order of the collection of the evidence should be based on how volatile the data is. How fast is it going to be erased, in other words. So please write down the IETF RPS. You start with the volatile, start with the data that's in the RAM, and you go all the way down to the data that's been backed up. So you check the data in the RAM first, the data that's been saved on the hard drive, and the data that's been backed up. And typically, you don't want to turn any computers off unless you are told to. If there's an incident where a computer is running, don't turn off the computer, don't reboot, don't do anything. All right? Because everything has to be analyzed. Chain of custody. Okay, so you have to understand the definition, so please write that down. The chain of custody will involve the collection, handling, and securing of the evidence. So please write all of this down, okay? Detailed record should be kept. Because remember, the chain of custody, you have to be able to show that an actual criminal incident has happened. It has to be proven in court. that's why you got to follow the chain of custody. You have to identify who discovered and collected the evidence. All details regarding the handling of the evidence, the times, the places, and who was involved, and who has primary responsibility for the evidence. Who's responsible to keep the evidence secured, for example, and who was assigned, and when the custody was changed, if it was, who has physical access to the evidence, and that was while it was stored. So all of that you got to keep track of it. You can't just say, here's the evidence. I need to know. I need to make sure that this evidence has not been altered, tampered with, who took care of it, and how they took care of it. Right? The integrity and the preservation of the data. Right? The incident. So time-stamping. So write that down. Data integrity and preservation. Time-stamping files while it's being reserved to know exactly what happened. Users should, like I said, also write this down. Users should not disconnect, unplug, or turn off infected machines unless they are explicitly told to by security personnel. So you want to make sure, if you think that your computer is connected and it has, there's a chance that it might propagate a malware across the network, you may disconnect it from the network, but not necessarily unplug it or turn it off, because you want to actually see the data that might be in RAM, right, from the volatile. Attack attribution. So please write that down too. Attack attribution, it refers to the act of determining the individual, organization, or nation that is responsible. Who is responsible for this attack? Who did this? You need to have a good idea of who's attacking you and why do they want to attack you. So this is very important. You have to be able to identify the threat actors that are responsible for the attack. All right? And also write the last two bullet points for internal threats, because, a lot of times, believe it or not, this is overlooked. A lot of the attacks happens on the inside, and you want to be able to identify who in the inside was responsible for the attack. Okay, from the internal effect, you have asset management plays a major role in covering all the devices. You can find out the IP addresses, the MAC addresses from the DHCP log, from the syslog server. So you have a lot of information, a lot of places where you can dig up and find out where that attack was launched. The MITRE and ATT and AC framework. The MITRE, adversarial tactics, techniques, and common knowledge. So please write that down. This usually comes up on the test. This is really a framework that is worldwide, in fact, and enables the ability to detect attackers' tactics, techniques, and procedures as part of the threat defense. We don't really get into a lot of details in this chapter, so this is probably the biggest thing, probably that one slide that you'll see. But you should definitely learn more about this, because this is been used, all over the world, these techniques, the MITRE, ATT, and CK attack framework, that is. Okay, and here's a typical ransomware analysis from an Aniron sandbox. So this is a sandbox, and we ran a malware in there, a ransomware, and this is the result, the columns. And they tell you exactly, you can analyze it, all the data added in there. So this is a really nice framework that you can use to analyze attacks and find out where they came from. This is a specific ransomware exploit kit that was analyzed using the MITRE and ATT and CK framework. All right, now we take a look at the Cyberkill Chain. All right, very important to take a snapshot, and I want you to write these down. The Cyber Chain was developed by Lockheed Martin to identify and prevent cyber intrusion. So their idea is if you can stop any attack in any of here, you stop them from continuing. You do not want them to go all the way through the chain, all the way to the end. The idea is they have to go through all of these steps to actually have control of or have penetrated your system and got what they want. That's at the action and objective. So let's take a look at each one of those. So please write these down. I'm going to ask you to write them again. Take pictures of this, each screen. So the first step in the Cyberkill chain is reconnaissance. Reconnaissance is when the threat actor is really doing footprinting, scanning the network to find out where the loopholes, where the vulnerabilities are. All right, so they'll gather as much information. They may even use social engineering, gather information from anywhere, phishing, you name it. All right, what can you do? Check, this is the defenses that you can use. Web log alerts, you can look for that. You can look at data, mine browser analytics, build playbooks, prioritize defense around technologies and people that reconnaissance activity is targeting, right? Let the people know in terms of your employees, your users for the social engineering. Let them be aware of, these different techniques that threat actors may use to gather information. I'm talking about including phishing and things like that, or even giving you a phone call or things like that. But a lot of times when you are doing for ping sweep or just using whois commands to find out, footprinting about the network and where they are located, you can get a lot of information that is publicly known. Okay, but you have to deep in a little bit when you do enumerations, so you get more information. A good hacker needs to do a good job at reconnaissance, find out as much information as they can before they launch the attack. The more information you have, the easier you're going to make it for the attacker to break into your network and get in and out and get what they want as quickly as possible. And we want to try to avoid that. So we want to, if you can break it, make it hard for them to gather sensitive information at the first step of the Cyberkill chain, then you did a pretty good job. Well, after they get that information, they may use, the next step is write that down, weaponization. So they may use the information that they gather from the reconnaissance to develop a weapon. What can we use to launch an attack from the information that I have received? The IP addresses, maybe passwords, maybe open ports that I have. What exploit kits can I use to attack? Now, a lot of these exploit kits that are out, at the dark net, may be detectable by IDS systems. So, or IPS system or whatever, the firewall, the next generation firewalls. So may use a zero-day attack. A zero-day attack is something that you may develop a new type of exploit kit that will be launched and no one has a defense for it. So you have to have some, and the only way to defend against zero-day attacks is to have some sort of a policy that will, for example, deny any connection that would initiate it from outside, assuming that the attack is going to happen from the outside, of course. All right, so please take a picture of this, the weaponization. This is when they are thinking about what type of exploit software that they might want to use to attack your network. All right, then you've got the delivery. So they decided now on the exploit kit that they want to do, and now the delivery. So write that down. So the third step in the Cyberkill chain is the delivery. This is where the weapon is transmitted to the target, and most likely the target will have to take action. Double click on an executable file, and will allow the attacker to have access to your system. Okay, so, or they'll tell you here, click on this file, or so we can scan your hard drive to see if there's any malware or anything. Or there's a chance that you may win $1,000 if you log in and give us your account. Whatever it is, somehow they want to be able to deliver the malware and install it. And a lot of times you will have to take action and double click and install that application. So, and you probably don't have to do that if you bring in a USB drive and plug it in. So you make sure that your anti-mail software will always scan every USB drive that is connected to your system. And typically you want to be very careful of borrowing USB drives from anybody and plugging into your computer. So what can you do as a defense against the delivery? You probably want to analyze the infrastructure path, understand the targeted servers, people, and data available, infer the intent of the adversary based on a targeting. Why do they want to actually get that data, right? And collect email and web logs. So this way you can figure out where that data came from and how is it done. Exploitation. So once the delivery has been done there and they installed their malware, so the threat actor will break into vulnerabilities and gain access to the target. Okay, so write that down. So write these three and take a picture, of course, of this. So the most common exploit targets, of course, are applications, your operating system vulnerabilities, if there is one, and users themselves. Maybe I can capture the passwords, the hash passwords that are installed on your computer and take them offline and run an exploit kit to figure out what the passwords are, especially if the passwords that are used are weak, right? So we'll use the software, hardware, or any human vulnerabilities to execute the weapon, right? That's called that. So anything that is vulnerable, it could be in the hardware, software, or even the human. If they are vulnerable and they have some weaknesses, so that's, depending on the weapon that I've used, and I launched it and it's in there, I can use it to gather more to actually allow me to have access to your system. So what do? Employee security awareness and training. So there always have to be a training, security training, especially if you are working for a company that their data and is extremely important for them. So you want to let them know, be aware of social engineering, what they can and cannot install on their system, and how to protect themselves while they're not at work, for example. Web developer training for securing codes if you are in the software industry. Regular vulnerability scanning and pen testing. So you have to have within your IT security analysis team, you have to have someone that is able to do some pen testing to see how vulnerable the systems or the networks are. And if there is any, you need to use the mitigation techniques that we've discussed earlier. Make sure that all the endpoints, computers, iPads, you name it, they are secured and hardened. They are patched with the latest updates. And audit them if you need to. Maybe every 6 months you should tell all your hosts that we are going to audit your laptops, for example. And believe me, when you say that, nobody will do anything illegal or unethical because they know they are going to be checked later on. All right, installation. So that's the next step is installing. The threat actor will install a backdoor. This is very important to them. If they really want to have access to your system and always have access, because they might know that you might once you know that once you've been captured, somebody's going to. Alerts will immediately happen, will be sent, and to either firewalls or IPS systems or to you as a personnel, letting you know that there's an attack and you're going to take steps into mitigating this attack. So what a threat actor may do is they can go into and create a backdoor so that they can get in later on. So they need to have higher privileges to do that. Okay? So please write that down and take a picture of this. So they can install a web shell on a web server for persistent access, create point of persistent by adding services, auto-one, keys, and things like that, right? Of course, you want to use HIPs or other types of defense appliances to actually pinpoint where, if there is such a thing. Rootkits do this a lot. Command and control. So now we're getting into towards the end where you have to, now you are in control, the system is running, and you create a two-way communication between the victim and the threat actor. He has full connection to your system, and they pretty much you become like a zombie, right? So take a picture of this as well. And now the final step in the Cyberkill chain, again, take a picture and write the first bullet point for action objective. This is when the threat actor has control of your system. There's really nothing you can do. He probably took everything out. They need to, broad down your network if that's the case, store all the data you want. So this is definitely a step you don't want to be at. Hopefully within the Cyberkill chain, you have stopped them on the way down. All right, the other model is called the diamond model, intrusion analysis. So let's take a look at that. You need to write these four features in the intrusion diamond model. The adversary, that's the threat actor, right? Then you have the capability, the infrastructure, and the victim. Okay, so the diamond model is, for the adversary can be, they can develop capabilities and so on. So let's talk about how this would work in analyzing a security or an event, right? So when you are analyzing an intrusion, you may want to use the diamond model. And you can pivot. So pivoting across diamond models, so you can go from adversary to capability and jump to infrastructure or the victim, right? So so this is an example of pivoting between different features. So here's the diamond and event threaded together. So you can actually, here's the Cyberkill chain, right? So you can go from reconnaissance, weaponization, delivery, step by step. So this gives you an example of how it works. You can read through this and how this whole, diamond kill, the diamond model and the kill and the Cyberkill chain works. All right, so let's now take a look at the incident response. You have to be able, now let's say there's an incident already, and you need to respond to it. So we really, this part of the chapter really summarizes the NIST 800-61R2 standard. It's just a summarization, and it's going to be on the test, but it's probably a good idea to get into a little bit more details beyond what we really covering here in this chapter. All right, so please take a look at this. So the incident response capability, this is really summarizes the policy and what you're going to do when there is an incident and how you're going to respond to it. So you have to have policy elements. You got to have a statement of the management commitment and the purpose of the objective of this policy. This has to be a written document, right? The scope of the policy, the definitions of computer security, and all of that information. Then there's the plan. What are we going to do? What is the mission? What's the strategies and goal? And organization approach to an incident. How do we approach it? How is the incident response team will communicate with the rest of the organization? Who's going to talk to who? Who's responsible for what? And so on. How the program fits in the overall organization security model. And then the procedure elements, the technical processes you need to write down. This is more step by step on what you're going to do when there is an incident. Filling out forms, following the checklists, and so on. All right. Who are the stakeholders in handling the security incidents? Almost everybody. But please write these down. The management is going to be, they have a stake in this, information assurance, the IT support, of course, the legal department, the public affairs and media relations, the human resources, need to know about this. The business continuity planners, the physical security and facility management. Okay, so everybody, these people need to know about every single incident that happened in terms of, attacks. All right. You may use the Cybersecurity Maturity Model Certification, the CMMC. So this is certifies this certification for organizations. You can be certified for response to incidents. So there are 4 steps. The first step, I think, when it comes to incident, the first you don't have to worry about it for just for incident purposes. So there are 4 of them really that you need to worry about. Establish an incident response plan, like we discussed earlier. Follows the NIST processes. Document and report. Use knowledge of the attack of TTP to define the incident response planning and execution, and utilize accepted and systematic computer forensic data gathering techniques. All right. Or you may use the NIST, which is most commonly used, incident response life cycle. So please write these 4 and their definitions. Your prep. So members of the CSIRT are trained to how to respond to incidents. Got to be prepared. So what are you going to do when somebody calls in or reports an incident? Detection and analysis. Well, let's take each one of them. So preparation is the phase is when you're created and you're training people on what you're going to do when there are an incident. These are just examples of them, right? Next is going to be detection. So please write these 4 or 5 bullet points for detection. So different types of incidents will require different responses. For example, when you are detecting, you want to be able to identify the attack vectors. Where did the attack come from? The web, the email, the loss or theft, the impersonation, the attrition, and media, all of that. Who is, all that information. Where did they come from? Detection is your automated detection that you have. You may have antivirus software that allows you to do that, IDS system, manual detection, or maybe just user report, right? Analysis is you're going to analyze this data that you got from whatever you detected to determine the validity and securing incident. Maybe it's not an actual attack. And scoping. This is all in here in detection and analysis. You provide information on the containment of the incident and deeper analysis effort. And incident notification. Notify the appropriate stakeholders, like the one we talked about. And not, whoever is, you think need to know about the incident has to know what happened. Okay? So this is in detection and analysis phase. And then we're going to talk about now the containment, eradication, and recovery. So write these 4 bullet points. So now that you detected, analyze the data, what are we going to do? We want to be able to contain the attack from propagating to other systems, eradicate it, get rid of it as much as, get rid of it, of course. And if we can recover our data and then secure, of course, then we'll talk the post-incident activity in a second. So containment strategy, how you're going to contain it, depending on where the attack was launched and who the victim is. The evidence, make sure you keep track of the evidence, like we talked about the custody of chain earlier. So all that information has to be gathered and preserved. The attacker identification, if you can identify where the attack came from, their IP address, their MAC address, from anywhere, right? The more information you get about the attacker identification, the better. And then you go about eradication, recovery, and remediation, right? So you need to be able to clean the virus, the malware if you can. In some cases you have to wipe out everything and repartition the hard drive if an attack isn't on your computer. And then, of course, you want to try to recover as much data as you can. And remediation, protect yourself. That's why creating a sandbox with known malware like a honeypot to attract attacks will allow you to find out what type of attacks you have and then take remediations before the actual attack occurs. And the final step, you want to write this down, is post-incident activities. What do you do when this whole thing is done? Okay? Lesson learned. So you want to be able, please write these two down, review the effectiveness of the incident handling process. Was there a problem? How long did it take? What can be improved? What is the pitfalls? What is the next time if this thing happen again? How we are going to react? And the policy, that document, if there's any changes that you need to do, you make sure you put it in there. And you train the stakeholder, everyone that is involved in the incident. Identify the necessary hardening techniques. So if there's any patches that you need to do, closing doors, windows, locking down computers, having security cameras, whatever, you need to have that in place to mitigate and prevent this from happening again. All right, incident data collection and retention. So below we'll summarize the incident data and collecting retention. So the incident data collections, you want to be able, just take a picture of this. The collected data after the lesson learned. So you need to determine the incident cost. How much did it cost you? Determine the effectiveness of the CSIRT. Identify possible security weaknesses. So all of that you have to evaluate after you're all done and you took care of things. What are you going to do, right? And then the retention. Prosecuting. You can identify who did it and from where. And data type. You can specify the type of data that should be kept for a certain amount of time before moving it, securing it, and the cost of the hardware to store that data and secure it. So reporting requirements and information sharing. You have to be, if there's an incident, it's probably a good idea to report this if it's a criminal act, unless most likely if something was done illegally, and most likely it is, not necessarily unethical, but it should be reported to the government, right? The government regulations should be consulted with the legal team to determine the responsibility of the organization and what they have to do in terms, protecting themselves. Management needs to determine what additional communication is necessary to the stakeholders and customers and vendors. So if somebody attacked our servers and I am an e-commerce company and they got to the database and the credit card numbers and names, I had to let the customers know. That's a responsibility. I have to let the stakeholders of the company also know that this actually happened, when it happened, how bad it is, and what they think, and is it protected now or not. Okay, hiding it so you don't look bad is illegal, right? So please write the last bullet point, the NIST, and all of these bullet points. So the NIST recommends that an organization coordinate with the organization share details for the incident. The critical recommendation for NIST for sharing information are as follows. So these 5 bullet points. Plan and incident coordinations with external parties. So you have to have that in place. Consult with the legal department before initiating any coordinating effort. Perform the incident information sharing throughout the incident response life cycles that we discussed earlier. Attempt to automate as much of the information sharing process as possible, so it becomes immediately, right? The faster you get that information out, the better it is, because people are aware and then they can take defense. Balance the benefits of information sharing with the drawback. Because sometimes you have to hold something back so that the attacker can't hide themselves. So it all depends on the situation that you are in. But in most cases, in terms of breaching your data, so, the victim needs to know. All right. And that ends our final chapter. I really hope you enjoyed the lecture. We will be spending a lot of time in class doing labs so you can retain the content a little bit more, especially. Okay, so please, the notes that I asked you to do, upload them, and until we see each other in a different course,